Hi everybody. So I decided to take a little time to do somewhat of a track walk or exploring my thought process as I drive the Thunderbolt racetrack at New Jersey Motorsports Park. I'll preface with the fact that I'm certainly not the fastest or most experienced driver out there, just extremely passionate and about this sport and very I would say thoughtful person for anybody who knows me and enjoy learning every time I get out on a track. And in some ways I think some of what I say applies across the board, and others it may be specific to the GT4. So let's get right to it. Turn 1. Over the weekend I approached this as trying to brake later and later. However, I was losing time, as with the hard braking, the car was very unstable with how bumpy the track is there. Ultimately, I would say losing V-min at the apex. So rather than braking at the end of the curbing, which I was doing, I began braking at the 4.5 board with less brake pressure, and then shift down to third, turn in between the end of curbing and the 1 board. It's probably a touch early still, but that made the car much more stable to allow me to punch out of the corner. For turn 2, it's a tiny brake to point the nose and turn in with the end of the curbing. It was definitely helpful to take all that inside curbing and trust you can get on the throttle. It is blind, but the track out curbing is very wide. The big thing I noticed is lots of traction control kicking in over that little cliff and on the curbing. The traction control really didn't like it, and it's probably the first time I would say I felt that the TC interfere and cut the throttle on track.
That's right. Very close.
Turn 3 is a flyer, really. I'm in 4th gear, lift, and just touch the brake ever so slightly just before the end of the curbing so you can turn in at the end of the curbing and use that scrub to really point the car towards the inside curbing. If I do it right, I can get right back onto the throttle well before the apex and power through. I clobber all of that inside curbing to straighten this out as much as possible. I wind up taking about half that outside curbing on the left, so there's still margin there. I just would say fly over the hump and then approach turn 4. Turn 4 is, I'd say, another very fast turn. It can be very daunting, and a lot of people spin between 4 and 5. And if you've seen videos or done it yourself, you know what I'm talking about. I start a hard brake to about the 1 board and then trail to the apex and absolutely murder that curb. It's going to be another trust part as I throttle out of the apex to track out. Over time, I would say you build up enough confidence, but the truth is the throttle settles the car at a turn 4, or you can easily get that oversteer and spin.
Apex earlier.
Coming into turn 5, I don't waste time pulling to the right to get a run. I mean, this is basically a throwaway turn in my mind. And for whatever you gain going right to get a better run out, you lose in scrubbing to get to the right. I just take it tight, so I may have to bring the V-min down, but I don't lose the time trying to pull the car out to the right. I do drop to 2nd gear here. You do have to be careful, so I'm pretty cautious getting on the throttle, as it's very torquey at that point and easy to rotate the car. Turn 6 is another beautiful high-speed turn. I mean, right around the 1 board, I touch the brake lightly to get the nose pointed. I'm transitioning from brake to neutral just before mid-corner and then modulate the throttle. It feels like I can carry the brake a touch longer to allow a quicker full throttle application. Coming into turn 7, it's a fairly heavy brake application at the 1.5 board for me, with a pretty aggressive turn-in. It kind of makes you want to wait, but you can't wait too long. The thing with this turn, and frankly I was the one before, is you really need to get the car heavily into the apex curbing. There's a good amount of camber in there, and if you don't get the wheel into the curbing, it'll just feel like the car doesn't want to turn. Lots of people go off here for a variety of reasons. So coming out of 7 and approaching turn 8 is also another big area where people seem to spin. It's a fairly heavy braking zone, but I chose not to go so deep that the car feels out of control. I just learned to kind of apply the brake a bit sooner, but a touch lighter. And don't get don't get me wrong. I mean, this is a heavy brake zone, but be very careful. Essentially, with too much steering lock, you'll either spin out or go straight off. We've seen plenty of people do it here, and I do it in a sim tons, trying to push the limit. I just kind of then continue to use a softer brake to tuck the car into the right until I can see the octopus, and then again punch straight to the curbing. And this is another place like turn 5 where I don't go wide right. It just doesn't seem to make sense to me. I feel like you lose more time going out to the right than you gain in that section further down the track. So I just kind of punch straight to the corner. And as you keep climbing that slight elevation, you keep applying that medium throttle and pick up speed until you can see the bridge essentially, and then I'm on full throttle. And this for me is more of a feel thing. As long as I can make that, first kink full throttle, I know I'm good. The next two corners are like little kinks. Like I said, they are full throttle all the way through. And as I would say, through this octopus section, I found no value for the GT4 to take second gear, as you have to modulate the throttle all the way through, and at no point does there seem to be an advantage to needing the extra torque, other than the car's just a little kind of more lively and potentially spinning underfoot. Turn 12 is the magic turn. It's a very high speed and tricky initially, and a lot of trust is needed. And I thought I might be able to use the lift for the shift to fourth to turn in. However, I hit the rev limiter just before turn in, and that causes, I would say, that slight instability. The car kind of kicks back, which I didn't. I don't like in this section. We really want the car to be stable. It's very high speed, so I chose to shift into fourth, just before, a touch earlier, just under the bridge. I have a very slight lift to turn that wheel and then punch it full beans, taking a ton of that curbing and just full on all the way through, and you got to trust it before you even get to that curbing. And you can see that there's still some margin on the left side track out curbing. Definitely have to keep your foot in it there to keep the car stable. Then it's the straight run down to the line for a solid lap. And there you have it. That's kind of my view of how I take a lap around Thunderbolt at New Jersey Motorsports. I hope it helps somebody.